It was a rainy morning when Michael, a humble construction worker, hurried down the empty street. His old jacket barely protected him from the cold, yet he kept walking with determination. In his hand, he carried a small lunchbox wrapped in a worn cloth. That day, however, his heart was heavier than usual. It was his daughter's birthday, and he had no money for a gift. Little Anna was only 7, but her eyes carried a light that could brighten the darkest room. Michael wanted nothing more than to see her smile when he came home. But his pockets were empty, and reality felt merciless. Still, he whispered to himself, "I'll find a way. She deserves it." With that silent promise, he stepped into the storm. The bus was late, as always. Michael stood under the broken shelter, raindrops dripping through the cracked roof. Around him, people complained about the weather, but he stayed quiet. His mind was lost in thoughts of his daughter, her laughter echoing in his memory. Love gave him strength where money failed. When the bus finally arrived, Michael sat near the window. He watched the city rushing by, each person carrying invisible battles. He wondered how many fathers shared his pain, wishing they could give more. A sigh escaped his lips, but then something caught his eye. Across the street, a boy stood barefoot, shivering in the rain. The child was holding a small cardboard sign. It read in shaky letters, "Hungry, please help." Michael's chest tightened. He checked his pockets again, but as he expected, they were empty. The only thing he had was his daughter's lunch, carefully prepared by his wife. Michael's hands trembled as he looked at the lunchbox. Inside were rice, beans, and a small piece of chicken meant for his daughter. His heart wrestled with a painful choice: give away the only meal he had, or keep it for Anna's birthday. He closed his eyes and whispered, "God, guide me." Without hesitating further, Michael got off at the next stop. He crossed the street and approached the shivering boy. The child's eyes widened, unsure whether to trust the stranger. Michael knelt down, placed the lunchbox in his hands, and smiled softly. "This is for you. Eat well, little one." The boy blinked rapidly, as if unsure if this was real. Then, tears filled his eyes and spilled onto his cheeks. "Thank you, sir," he whispered, clutching the box with trembling fingers. Michael felt warmth spreading through his chest despite the cold rain. At that moment, he realized love was the greatest gift of all. As Michael walked away, hunger began to gnaw at his stomach. He knew that when he returned home, Anna would ask about her birthday. But he also knew she would be proud if she understood what he had done. The rain poured harder, soaking him completely. Still, his heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. When he reached the construction site, his coworkers noticed his soaked clothes. "Rough morning?" one of them asked. Michael forced a small smile and nodded. He didn't mention the boy or the sacrifice. Some stories were too sacred to be spoken aloud. The day dragged on with heavy labor. Michael lifted bricks, mixed cement, and ignored his growling stomach. Every now and then, he imagined Anna's face, reminding him why he endured. By evening, he collected his pay for the day, barely enough for bread and milk, but he promised himself he would still make the night special. On his way home, Michael stopped at a small bakery. The sweet smell of fresh bread filled the air. He counted his coins carefully and bought the smallest cake they had. It was nothing fancy, just a plain sponge cake with white frosting. Still, to him, it was priceless. When he opened the door to his humble home, Anna came running. "Daddy," she shouted, throwing her arms around his waist. Her joy melted away all the fatigue he carried. Michael lifted her up, holding her tightly. In that embrace, the world suddenly felt perfect. His wife Clara smiled warmly from the kitchen. She noticed the small cake in his hands and her eyes softened. "Michael, you didn't have to," she said. He kissed her forehead gently. "Our daughter deserves to feel loved today," he replied. They lit a single candle on the cake. Anna clapped her hands with pure excitement. She closed her eyes and made a wish, her little lips whispering softly. Michael watched her, tears forming in his eyes. Her innocence was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. After singing happy birthday, they shared slices of the small cake. Anna's eyes sparkled as if it were the grandest feast. Michael realized then that love, not luxury, created true celebration. His daughter didn't care about presents or money. She only cared about the presence of her family. Later that night, after Anna fell asleep, Clara sat beside Michael. She held his rough, calloused hands in hers. "I know things are hard, my love," she whispered. "But what you gave today was greater than any gift." Michael lowered his head, fighting back his tears. He told her about the barefoot boy in the rain, how he gave away Anna's lunch to feed him. Clara's eyes glistened with pride rather than anger. "You taught our daughter something more valuable than toys," she said. "You showed her compassion." Michael lay awake that night, reflecting on his choices. His stomach was empty, but his heart was full. He prayed silently, thanking God for the chance to give, and he asked for strength to keep providing for his family. Sleep finally came with peace. The next morning, Michael returned to work, but something unusual happened at the construction site. The foreman called him into the office. Nervous, Michael feared he might lose his job. Instead, he was offered a new position with better pay. Confused, Michael asked, "Why me?" The foreman smiled and handed him a folded letter. "It's because of what you did yesterday." Michael's eyes widened. Inside was a note from the boy's mother. The letter read, "Dear Sir, you gave my son food when no one else cared. We were watching from across the street, desperate and hopeless. Your kindness reminded me that humanity still exists. I spoke with my cousin, who owns this company. I asked him to give you the chance you deserve." Michael's hands shook as he finished reading. He never imagined that one small act could ripple so far. The raise meant he could finally provide more for Anna. His heart overflowed with gratitude. He whispered again, "God, you always provide." That evening, he returned home with good news. Anna ran to him, curious about his big smile. He lifted her into his arms and spun her around. "Daddy got a new job, sweetheart," he said. Her laughter filled the room like music. Clara hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't need to ask how it didn't matter. What mattered was the hope now burning in their hearts. Michael looked around their small home with new eyes. Suddenly, it didn't feel so small anymore. At dinner, Anna asked, "Daddy, can we help more children like that boy?" Michael paused, touched by her words. He realized she had absorbed the lesson of compassion. "Of course, my little angel," he said softly. "We will help whenever we can." From that day forward, Michael and Clara set aside small portions of food. Whenever they encountered someone in need, they shared it. Their home became known in the neighborhood for kindness. Though they were not wealthy, they were rich in generosity. and their daughter grew up with a heart full of love. Years passed, and Anna blossomed into a young woman. She never forgot her father's sacrifice on her 7th birthday. That memory shaped her dreams and her purpose in life. She studied hard, determined to make a difference. Her heart was set on helping children who suffered hunger. When Anna graduated, she chose to become a social worker. Her parents beamed with pride as she received her diploma. Michael whispered to Clara, "It was worth every struggle. The small cake, the empty stomach, the rainy day, all of it had led to this moment." One afternoon, years later, Anna visited a shelter. There, she saw a familiar face. It was the boy from the rain, now a grown man. He was volunteering, serving food to the homeless. Their eyes met, and recognition struck instantly. The young man smiled and said, "Do you remember me?" Anna nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "You were just a child holding a sign." "Yes," he replied softly, "and your father saved me that day." The weight of destiny filled the room. The boy, now a man, explained his journey. That meal had given him hope when he was ready to give up. He stayed in school, determined to honor the stranger's kindness. Now, he dedicated his life to feeding others. Anna realized her father's act had created a chain of miracles. Later that evening, Anna rushed home to tell her parents. She hugged Michael tightly and said, "Dad, you changed lives." Michael chuckled humbly, shaking his head. "I only gave a lunchbox, my dear." "No," Anna insisted. "You gave hope." Michael sat silently, reflecting on his daughter's words. Hope that was indeed the real gift. One small act of love had multiplied beyond measure. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. Clara placed her hand on his, whispering, "You were chosen." As the family sat together that night, they felt a sacred unity. They realized wealth was not in money, but in love shared. The walls of their home carried stories of compassion, and Anna vowed to continue spreading her father's legacy. Their struggles had turned into blessings. Years later, Michael grew old and frail. His hands, once strong from labor, now trembled with age. But whenever he saw Anna working with children, his spirit lifted. He knew his life had purpose beyond survival. He had planted seeds that would never die. On his final birthday, the family gathered around him. Anna brought out a cake this time, a large one with many candles. "Do you remember my 7th birthday, Daddy?" she asked softly. Michael smiled weakly but brightly. "Yes, my angel. I remember every detail." She held his hand and whispered, "That was the day you gave me more than cake. You gave me the meaning of life, love, and kindness." Michael's eyes glistened, overflowing with pride. His heart was full, and he felt complete. He had lived a life of true richness. When Michael passed away peacefully, the neighborhood mourned deeply. Stories of his kindness spread like wildfire. People he had helped came forward to share their memories. His legacy was larger than he had ever imagined. He was remembered as a man of compassion. Anna, though grieving, felt strong. She carried her father's values as a torch. At his funeral, she spoke through tears. "My father taught me that the smallest act of love can change the world." Her words touched every soul present. Years later, Anna opened a foundation in her father's name. It provided food and education for countless children. The story of the rainy day and the lunchbox became its symbol. People across the city were inspired to join the mission. Michael's love continued to live on. The barefoot boy, now a leader himself, became her partner in the cause. Together, they reached thousands of families. They often shared the story of the man who gave his daughter's lunch away. Each time, hearts softened and eyes filled with tears. Kindness had become a movement. The foundation grew, expanding across towns and villages. Children who once starved now had food and hope. Parents who once despaired now believed again. And it all traced back to one rainy morning. One man, one choice, one act of love. Anna never stopped honoring her father's memory. Every year on her birthday, she lit a candle, not just for herself, but for the child her father saved, for the thousands of children saved after him, and for the lesson that kindness never dies. The story of Michael spread far beyond their city. It became a tale of faith in humanity, shared worldwide. People who heard it found courage to act with love, because in the end, the greatest wealth is compassion, and one small act can change the course of many lives.